Thank you. So just before we kick it off, I wanted to clarify a little bit on the topic, right? So this is not to suggest that it's a zero-sum game. So you can have advanced analytics creating actionable insights. I think the flavor we're trying to give to the discussion today is more about how do you balance it and customize it to the relevant context at hand, right? So I want to kick off the discussion by asking each of the panelists the question of how often do you see this problem? How big is this a problem where you have teams building solutions, building platforms, and then struggling a little bit with sort of the actionable aspect of it and creating impact and customer success? I just want to get the initial views from the panel around how big a problem is it, how often do they see it, with any examples if possible.
So I think I'll talk mainly from a service provider standpoint. We are in the services industry. I represent WNS. I lead the banking, insurance, and healthcare verticals for analytics. So typically when we work with large multinational clients, everybody is around doing advanced analytics, AI, ML. They are always talking about big data, and the focus is they think that this is something which will bring a lot of big bucks, do high business impact, right? However, the people you talk to and the other community that will use it within the organization are always not really on the same page. I think that's the biggest problem in the industry where when we see, and these are in advanced countries as well. So I'm talking about US markets, I'm talking about Europe, I'm talking about Asia Pacific, all across. So the key thing is really understanding the organization culture, understanding who are the key stakeholders internally, and how do you deliver outcome, right? So these things need to be integrated in a much bigger way. And I think that's where the discussion is focused today. I'll let Iqbal speak about it.
I have worked on both sides of the table. I have worked for large organizations like GE and Target. I have worked in a consultant capacity with some other multi-billion-dollar organizations. And now I am part of a startup, and we are building a platform where some of these companies are our customers. And I would say that this problem definitely exists. A lot of times when as analytics teams, I remember one of the off-sites way back in GE, we were trying to come out with a mission vision statement for our analytics team, and actionable insights were the word that was coming again and again. And why was it so? And it hasn't changed even today. Because a lot of times when we provide the insights, and it is something I have seen, in 2001 when I started my analytics career, and I see it today, the business doesn't know how to use those insights, how to implement them. And then if we don't help them as analytics teams, they end up not using them and then blaming the tool or blaming the data warehouse or blaming the data itself or the analytics company. So that wasn't great. I think the challenge is rarely in the kind of models we build or the kind of insights we provide. The challenge is how do we help those insights become actionable for the business. So yeah, it's widespread. I've seen it across verticals. I've seen it 17 years ago. I see it today.
And I think you also see that in your own internal teams, right? For like Big Basket and
yeah. So at Big Basket, the answer is fairly clear for us. So everything that we do in the analytics team is focused on our customers, focused on the 5 to 6 million customers that we have across the country. So making sure that anything that we do in terms of applying analytics is to enhance their experience. And therefore, we clearly have a framework within the organization that, we call as DAI, the definitive actionable insights. So it's not just about insights, it's about being definitive so that we are not debating the insights, the source for the insights, and more importantly, that it is actionable. And what I've clearly learned from serving the various stakeholders within the organization as well as outside is that our stakeholders are our customers, our leadership team, and the business teams, and they're not worried about whether this is the most advanced tool or the coolest tool that you're applying, as long as it's actionable for them. like Iqbal said, the business teams want to look at that information and begin to drive actions out of it. But understandably, when you are building some of these solutions, there's always the temptation to look at the next big thing that's already out there and see if that could help you go up the learning curve faster and be more impactful very quickly. But clearly, it eventually boils down to being actionable. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So when we talk about actionable and advanced, I would say that actionable insight is the what that we are trying to achieve, and the advanced answers the how. And that's where when you look at the how, there can be alternatives to, do we go advanced techniques, do we apply heavy duty statistics, do we do simpler things, but the end goal is always the same. And I feel that, again, like many of us having been on both sides, when you're working internally in an in-house organization, these discussions are a little more tempered by the complexity of the data that's involved, the risk that's involved, the time that the effort will take. And so the solution as to how you progress towards that insight is more joined together with the customer and the analytics professionals. Whereas if you're in a third party and you're trying to pitch to a client and you're desperate to get that, that project, then you have to appear cool, the 10 different ways this thing can be done, and we've got it pat. And you sometimes shy away from saying that, look, I know you want this, but here's an easier way, because obviously when I'm selling something, I will sell the most complex thing I can do. So that's where some of this conflict arises, I feel.
Right, and so right here in this venue, I think something that struck me is over the last day and a half, those who have attended many panels, I think this topic has been covered in some way or the other, not as an entire discussion, but parts of the discussion did cover this. But then when you go outside on the corridor, you see all the placards and the boards. Mm-hmm. None of them are talking about simple stuff, right? You see, neural networks, you see ML programs, you see, training organizations showcasing that. So how do you then sensitize the new people entering the industry, the fact that, there's an end to the means, right? So how do you address that challenge? I mean, you can just keep it informal, anybody.
So that's a very important question, because like Nidhi pointed out, when we talk to some of the partners that we want to work with, there's always the pressure on them to begin to talk about what is the next coolest thing to deploy. So some interesting problems that we are tackling right now, bring about this debate that we have sometimes. So for us, our perishables are a big part of our business, and the traditional forecasting models don't do a good job there, because you've got to strike a good balance between our customer experience in terms of the item being out of stock. So you could stock up and through that manage customer experience, so they'll never see out of stock, but then you are going to have significant amount of dump or wastage, as we call it. So you've got to strike the balance between what is customer experience and what is going to be wastage. So we are relying on a good old OR model, which is the single period inventory model for perishables. But I keep hearing from partners as well as people coming into the industry about why not try out some of the deep learning techniques that are available, LSTM, CNN, and so on. And so the way we approach that and we help them understand that is that every iteration that we do, and all of these solutions that we build for our customers, we do them in iterations. So iteration 1 achieves some things, and it's focused on the outcomes that come from it. And iteration 2 is not necessarily because the roadmap says that this is the coolest thing to do, but it is that we measured what happened in iteration 1, and we want to improve that performance, and therefore we'll do iteration 2 and use whatever helps in getting to that measurable outcomes that we want to. So for example, on perishables, our goals are very clear. It's about no more than 4% out of stock, no more than 2% dump. And if our current model can't deliver that, then iteration 2 is what is going to help us get there, right? And so that's how we try approaching these problems, and also help people entering the industry understand that it's outcome focused, it's iterative, and whatever the tool is that helps us get there, absolutely, let's do that.
I think the challenge is that you have to strike a balance, right? Sometimes analytics is like trying to find oil. You will dig in 10 places and you might find oil only in the 10th place. Doesn't mean that 9 times you try to dig it, it was wasted. It was information. Now you know that those 9 places are not going to yield results, or those 9 techniques or 9 ways are not going to help you. What is more important is that after every time you develop a model or do a customer segmentation or whatever it is that you are doing, what we qualify as advanced analytics today, there should be a way to measure its success, right? Measure its return. Because if it is not there, then the chances are we build the model, business likes it, but nobody has a reason to implement it.
Right.
Unless they feel it's really going to give them results. And without implementation, without measuring in that, this is where I really love the Six Sigma methodology. The control phase is where you really realize the value of the work that you have done from define to the solution phase. And if you don't have that in the project, if the project is done, people love it, you get your award, and that's it, we will continue to have these discussions next year and the year after.
And
I think,
go ahead.
Just to add to what Mani and Iqbal mentioned, I think it's also a context, right? If you're looking for a startup kind of context, it will be quite different. If you are looking to work with really big organizations, then it's quite different. I would like to step back from the excitement of doing all intellectual stuff for a moment. And if you look at the ecosystem, look at the environment. So typically, you want to build a very impactful model, be it a machine learning model or whatever it is. But this model in itself is not going to give you any dollar amount. And to actually build a model, you need to work with technology folks within the organization. You need to really mine the data well, get information from all sources. All of us are doing it. But probably when we are actually looking at solving one problem, we get too excited in just focusing on what technique to apply. What open source programming, do I do R or Python or something else, right? I think we need to bring in the whole community in the game. When I say community, I'm actually referring to some of the key people who you need to really monetize this effort. So I think we spoke about measurable, but before that, we also need to understand, how do we have the right information, data to get the model out? Then we build the model. I think this room is more focused on that. We all have expertise in that area. But then you need to really work with, again, the technology or the IT folks to productionalize that model. But what do you call actionable is very important, because you need to really define what is actionable. It doesn't stop with just deploying the model. Then you have to really see how you want to operationalize it, because there is a big operationalization aspect to it. You can put the model, it can score something, it will give you some output. How are the operations team actually taking that and getting the bugs? So for just one example here, if you want a very complex fraud model, for example, we work a lot in the insurance space in fraud models. So you build a fraud model, you will get a score which is the probability that this is the chances that this transaction will be fraudulent. But what do you do with it? Then the operation guys will come in and act on it. And that's how you really improve your false positives or whatever you call it, right? So that's important. And then you need to have measurable metrics. Unless you really measure it, you cannot manage the whole process. So that's the flow which you also need to handhold some of the other communities, do it in a very collaborative and consultative way.
Yeah, and I think, so the industry is at an interesting phase where I think it's 7, 8, 10 years old as formally defined. And therefore the initial buzz of doing things for the sake of doing, I think, is over. Right now, people are demanding returns. People are demanding to see the value and the payback of what they're investing into. But at the same time, things are developing really fast in terms of the computing and in terms of advanced techniques. And I think, how do you see those two, almost contradictory developments, right, work together. Because you need real tangible outcome, but at the same time, especially the big 4 companies in the world are really going very advanced, and that's where you get the most of the media coverage, and people are really getting carried away by it. But the rest of the world is still looking about more plain vanilla problems, which are still data intensive, which are still, can be solved today better than 10 years ago. But there is still, that's a disconnect that we are seeing with the majority of, at least from our customer perspective.
Actually, I will not call it a disconnect. I feel that the advancement in technology is making things easier. I still remember the time we used to take days to build a logistic regression model, and now we can do it in 2 hours, right? And we are not saying that that one was really superior, but there was a lot more human intervention required, whereas now the human intervention is taken over by the machine part of it, the whole machine learning. So I believe the disconnect is not in the fact that technology is making things unactionable or too advanced. The challenge is that when we use technology today, sometimes we end up using technology for the sake of it. We were just discussing offline, some of us, and when we try to hire data scientists, they say, oh, I know Python and I can do this in Python, great. When you ask them, why did you do this technique? Then they don't have any answers why I chose this technique over something else. So having the right business context, understanding your data, it's garbage in, garbage out at the end of the day, and then applying the right technique using the latest technology is going to really give great results. Till 5 years ago, I was in a SaaS world where things were done at a different pace. In the last 5 years is where I have learned more about R and Spark and Python. And to be honest, now I love Python more than I love SAS, even though my comfort level to do coding in SAS would still be higher today. But in my own company, we use a lot of machine learning, both for the data integration and analytics part, and it's fast, it's better, it allows me to compare results across techniques, and for a particular problem, I can see, okay, this isn't working, that isn't working, pick up something else, and I'm pretty impressed with technology, and I think it is helping if we use it in the right fashion.
But I think, don't you feel that the gap between, say, all of us knowing analytics, we know what all of this is about, and then when you are delivering or there's somebody, the action has to be taken by another party out there. How much do they know what's going on under the hood? How much faith do they have in what you've created for them? I think that's where the gap is increasing because of all these technologies, because they have a different day job. They're not living and breathing Python and R every day. And we are giving them more and more advanced solutions, but they don't have the time to catch up with some of it at times.
So I think this is where the need for the analytics team to be a little more prescriptive, right? I mean, we have to get out of the situation where we give them a model and expect them to figure out where should be the cutoff, versus now we should be telling them how to use it. Yes, nobody likes to give away, all their deciding power to the analytics team. So give them options, give them scenarios, give them, okay, if you use this, this is what happens to your revenues. If you use this, this is what happens to your losses. So I think there is always an art and science to decision making. So art will always stay with the business, but how do we augment that art with the science behind it is what I think we need to be better at as analytics folks.
But I want to pick up on something Nidhi pointed out. Like you rightly said, Paavan, the big 4 are kind of defining the boundaries for analytics. Facebook and Amazon and Netflix and Google are coming up with new things every single day. And so sometimes it's quite tempting to see if we could leverage any of that and be impactful, but then you have to realize that eventually, at least in our world, it's grocery. It's, potato, onions, tomatoes, diapers, all said and done, right? And so we have 3 moments of truth when it comes to, working with our customers, the time they come to order on the site or on the app, the time they get the delivery, and the time that they reach out to our customer service to get any help. And we've got to win in those 3 moments of truth. And so eventually it comes to just that the guy that's coming to deliver has got to be clean, he's got to do a good job of delivering and keep the customers satisfied. The customer service person, when he picks up the phone, he or she, is polite, answers the question that the customer has and gets it done. And so how do you just marry these 2 things? I mean, what is happening cutting edge and what is necessarily, the grind of the job every day? And I think, like Iqbal pointed out, there is an opportunity to leverage the technology advancements that these big 4 are pushing to your advantage, but keep yourself grounded to make sure that you still are focused on the local problems. Going back to what Nidhi said, we had this, happen just about a week ago. we deployed a collaborative filtering-based recommendation system for our customers. We wanted them to understand what we have in terms of offering, and we wanted them to understand the range. And thankfully for us, many of our own employees are our own customers, and so we get instant feedback, and they began to see some funny things in the recommendations, things that they had bought, right? Thankfully, this was a homegrown algorithm, so we could go in and understand what went wrong, but sometimes when I hear of, the next big model in deep learning that you could apply that would generate recommendations for you, I'm a little scared because, I don't want our experienced customers who don't have kids in the family getting recommendations for diapers, right? And having a hard time explaining to them why are they getting those recommendations. So use technology, the boundaries that the Big Four are pushing to your advantage. Like, again, Iqbal said a year ago, building a collaborative filtering model, and that's not a trivial problem. It's a quite an interesting problem. Technology is making it easy. Right. But always watch out to make sure that you're keeping your stakeholders happy.
I think I would just add a funny thing to that. We have to get to a stage where the way people can fly today in a jet and not worry about how the airplane functions because the outcome is delivered, right? We have to get to that stage, that people don't try to understand what's behind that model. I was that one person, I really needed to understand the technique. Now I can't, I'm not that advanced myself. I'm not that coder who developed that particular technique in Python. So I really don't understand how deep learning is going on in the roots. So even I have come to the terms that I will not understand every detail. So our business practitioners also need to get to that stage and have some faith as long as we show them the results, we show them the outcome.
I agree with you, Iqbal, but the question here is still this, right? If you're part of the analytics team, in-house, external, whatever that may be, the buck stops with you. So anything that, the analytics engine powers, you've got to know the answer for it, and therefore you've got to always resist the temptation between using the next coolest thing, but also make sure that you understand what is going in so that you can strike the right balance, right?
Indeed.
Right. And so, maybe just to make sure that it really sinks into the audience, if you can give some negative examples, right, or examples which showcase the point, which is where teams got really carried away or customers got really carried away and which led to a wastage or rework or a loss of some sort, right? And I know you were talking about the very first version, which was trying to do everything. So similar to that, any of you could have examples from your own experiences.
I think this is, as I said, earlier, it's a quite widespread problem. So people want to really jump. The excitement is just too much to really build something and do it, rather than focusing on the final outcome, whether you can monetize. So there are multiple examples where all the big organizations have invested a lot of money and they have burned their hands, because finally, and I'll give you some examples. So we were building a machine learning model, and we built the model, fantastic output with the test data, etc. When we wanted to really do put it live in production, the IT guys of the organizations came back and said that, you have to convert it into a SQL code. Now, any of you who have really done it, you can you will start banging your head on the wall and see how do we do that. Then I go back to my team and see, you cannot really do it in a SQL code without really backing it up, sending triggers within it, building it. So it's another project altogether, right? So that kind of unification, etc., need to be really well planned, pre-thought, and things like that. So that was one example.
One of the companies that I worked for, it was I think way back in 2010. Suddenly one of the senior leaders felt that the company needs a new customer segmentation because the competition had a good one. So a lot of vendors were called in, and the RFP process, all that happened, and we chose a vendor to do customer segmentation. The segmentation was done, took a lot of time and a lot of effort. There were challenges along the way. It was done, and then the business was like, now what? Yeah, now what? That's the question. Customer segmentation is not the end in itself, right? You have to use it. Did anybody think how you're going to use it? Just having customer segmentation is not going to help you, right? So I think the challenge a lot of times, you rightly said that even our business practitioners get swayed by hey, that's the coolest thing. Nidhi pointed out that a lot of time, the vendors will come and sell the most advanced thing. And I can tell now that I'm on the vendor side when I go into meetings, the marketer would tell me that's our target audience. But that tool gives me this and this and this and that. And sometimes I have to ask them, but how are you going to use that? Which business problem do you think that particular score or that particular graph is relevant to you? So I think the challenge is that there is sometimes it's very difficult to educate our, customer partners or our end customers if we are a service provider or a vendor. And sometimes even while within the company, I couldn't convince my senior leader that just don't go for customer segmentation. Think how will you use it. So I think there are enough examples. I think we can go on talking about then how.
I think one mindset I will really say is you need to really come out of just the analyst or analytics mindset and think from a business leader mindset. What is there for me if I build this as a business leader? And that's where you'll start thinking about a lot of redundancy will come in the picture. You can easily do away with. So those are some of the aspects you really have to think through when you want to take up and solve a problem.
And do you have any examples from a captive perspective? Anything which led to, Nidhi?
I can think of one case which wasn't a failure, but it was, in a retail environment when you're used to pricing based on what your competitor is doing, you're taking up prices or down depending on what the other guy has done. And we were implementing a price optimization solution with a lot of bells and whistles. All the data is going in and here will be the prices coming out. And so this was a category of pet food that was going through this optimization. And suddenly the prices were like, $34, $47, all over the place. The brands that were considered premium were priced lower than other brands. So it was just a struggle for the brand managers to then understand, hey, you've sort of disrupted my whole category here. So then you end up putting more and more constraints on the model to say that, okay, this price cannot increase this price. All prices should end in 99, all of those things. Then you have a heavy duty model, but then you're putting all your manual, constraints and intuition on top of it.
And so just going back to the same question, but this time trying to look at it through the lens of the size of the organization, do you think that plays a big role? Is there, keep it simple initially and then, get it advanced when you're either serving a larger client or if you yourself are a larger company with a larger analytics team, or is there a correlation, or is it size agnostic?
I think it would be more the culture of the organization and how they believe in, driving analytics and using data to drive it. So we've seen loads of examples of people doing that. How Dunnhumby helped Tesco using customer loyalty and analytics is a case in itself, versus many others. When talking as Wells Fargo, I would say, even within the financial sector, there is a lot of pressure of, regulators, and a lot of testing and risk assessment needs to be done before you really jump into anything. But I guess even within that, there are some who are trying out more cutting edge things than others. So, yeah.
I think here in this context also, I'll pick up a little bit from IT organizations where this is more prevalent, is picking up methodologies like Agile, DevOps, and Agile has slowly been integrated within analytics as well, right? Obviously, the way you implement, the way you approach it is you need to really tweak it around. But there are some good work happening in that area. How do you make an elephant dance, right? It's more to do with how do you really go along when the organization and the scale is really big. The question is, I think, one thing which all of you probably would have come across is when you are talking to the business partners, particularly analytics people talk in a completely different language, and business guys get quite frustrated in terms of, I understand all this, but, is it solving my problem, right? So those are the kind of things that we need to leverage from different areas and make sure we talk simple language which others can also understand.
I think more than the size, the kind of business model matters. If you are more of a brick and mortar structure, getting the data together in the first place, unless you had a very good data warehouse strategy from the beginning, itself is a challenge. And then when you don't have the data, advanced analytics is a moot point. But if you are a .com business, then from the word go, you have data, right? So if you can take example of big companies like Amazon or a smaller one like Big Basket, but the fact that you have data from the word go, there is a lot more you can do. On the other hand, if you look at companies like Target versus Walmart, Target struggled for many years to get the data in a place where advanced analytics could be used. And Walmart from the day one partnered with Teradata and said, I'm going to build a huge data warehouse. I don't want to analyze it. I'll have P&Gs and Unilever analyze it, but it's there. And I see what great work P&G does with the Walmart data.
In my experience, at least, it goes back to what Nidhi pointed out. It's the culture in the organization. So not too far long ago, I think we were operating out of 3 cities, delivering maybe about 15,000 orders a month. Now, it's about 1.5 million orders a month across 26 cities. But the focus on analytics is still the same. What can it do for our customers, and therefore, keep it simple.
So, so just to close this out, what do you suggest in terms of how to address this if tomorrow some of the business leaders in the organization or even service providers or platform providers in the organization, what is your 1 or 2 suggestions that you would give to make sure that they don't face this problem?
I would probably, the approach that we are typically following is we start with the end state. And we start with the outcome that we want to achieve. And then re-engineer the whole process back and see what is required. So, it's at a very high level. That's the philosophy that fits in most of the context. There may be 1 or 2 exceptions, but 95% of the cases, I think that's the mindset that we approach typically.
I think I would add to that, definitely the business problem or the outcome is very important, but you have to also remember that you need equally advanced systems to implement the solution that you have come out with. In one of the companies that I worked for, we could, for the supply chain team, we could do item level forecasting, but the software or the system that the supply chain team was using to order and to send the product to the stores could not handle item level forecasting. So item level forecasting is nothing major, right? You have the similar techniques, it's just that you are doing it for millions of items. But if the implementation is not possible, there's no point doing it. Exactly. So then we had to, we were planning to partner with, I think it was Teradata, or I'm forgetting the other company's name, but we had to drop the project altogether because we realized that we need to change not just the system, but a team of 400 people who manages that system, the processes behind it, and it's a 5-year project. So we can spend $50,000 or $100,000, but it'll be a waste of money. So yes, outcome, but then can your existing systems manage that outcome or that solution now that you have provided?
Yeah, great.
The suggestion I'd provide to them is to go back to this good video by Simon Sinek, who talks about the golden circles. So essentially it's all about struggling with questions like how, what, and why, but it is important to recognize that if you get the why right, you'll then know what you need to do. So in our case, again, an example is I've met with potential partners that have told us that they could do X, Y, Z for us, and and in some of these cases, the thing that they bring up is like Iqbal pointed out, customer segmentation. The other example is churn, predicting customer churn. So they say, fantastic tool, could churn billions of lines of data and tell you this customer is going to churn. And I remember sometimes getting excited by that. And in discussions with the leadership team, I get a reality check. They tell me, help me understand, great to know this customer is going to churn, but you know why, right? Because we've got to fix the why and not the who, right?
And what you can do about it.
Absolutely. And so the advice is going to be that whatever you are focusing on, make sure that you understand why and focus on that.
I would say, in a captive, what one often sees is that there is a set toolkit. The company is not willing to go in and buy multiple subscriptions and keep trying them out and build, expertise. But it's important to create a small environment where people can try things and fail if they have to, so that you're aware of what's going on in the world, which part of the business can it impact, and have you at least familiarized yourself with it and tested it out. And similarly, in a third party as well, I think, it's important to have that R&D kind of a mindset, even without, suddenly putting it in before a customer and, having to deal with the repercussions.
So now we can take some questions. The panelists can take some questions from the audience. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah. We just want to keep more time for the Q&A. Yeah.
Hi. See, the problem that we're talking about, disconnect, has been there for ages. Audible? Do you really think that it can be solved? Fundamental question.
Sorry, I couldn't really get it.
He's saying, can you really think this can be solved?
The disconnect between advanced and actionable.
Yeah.
I think we are solving it, right? We are already in that game. Obviously, we have not reached a stage where we are looking at solving every problem. Success rate, when you start and when you end, it's probably not very, very high. But that's part of the game. That's part of the journey, right? Once you keep doing, you improvise on it and then hit. But I think over last 2-3 years, we have come a long way by integrating technology and some of the discussions we just did, technology and analytics, right?
You're right. I think I'll pick the last point. I think we're solving the problem through technology. But human problem in the sense of, say kind of, if there is an analyst and he should also be in a position to talk that next level of language to the business and bridge that gap. I think that problem will remain because it's a human problem. Because the solution that we are actually seeking is through technological. See, if it is process improvement, you have the RPA coming up, automation coming up, you have maybe robotics solutions that are coming up, or maybe automated BI dashboarding with some flags or alerts. Those automated systems will solve some of the possible problems. Wherever there are human-related problems, I think they will remain to some extent. Maybe they will take a different shape.
I think it's a journey. It's never going to be one solution that you will arrive at. You have to just work towards getting better, and I think we are getting better.
So I definitely we are getting better. So I'm just trying to, that's a very good question, but I'm just trying to get into the root of it. When you talk about human problem, we are solving cognitive problems, right? Cognitive, there are a lot of work going on, and be it from health. So healthcare is being addressed through a lot of problems where we are looking at solving people's real life problems, right? Health is one thing which you can directly relate to. If you look at, psychological problems, which are probably one of the most complex ones to solve, there's a lot of good work which is happening where apps or products can actually help you come out of your depression. They can optimize and tell you what, as an individual, we don't know about ourselves. So think about, I'll just take one more minute and give you a journey here, right? So if you think about, do you really know through the day, or what are the key things that you like doing most? You feel really satisfied by doing small jobs, right? But if you have different ways of measuring it, and there are apps in the market which does that, which can actually tell you when you are feeling depressed, what are the key things you can do to, make your mood a little more upbeat. right? So there are cognitive problems also being solved.
And just to close that, right, so the simplistic way to look at what you're saying is if we don't solve this problem, then that's sort of a risk and a threat to the entire industry. Because I don't think anybody will accept non-actionable outcomes.
No, that's correct.
Correct. So we have to, so that itself is a good enough incentive and motivation.
Yeah, correct. So the point that I was making was, we are looking at converting non-actionables to actionables through actually the technology.
Yes.
Technology becomes the enabler, but human element will remain as it is, maybe with a different shape. That's what.
So the human element, I mean, technology, the way you code it will always do things the way it has to do it. The human element adds judgment to it. Human element can bring something to success, something to failure, and that's the nature of humans.
Humans are adapting, right? Our parents or even we sometimes have challenged with some technology, and you see kids 3-year-olds handling technology better than us. So humans are adapting.
Yeah.
So
So the quality of that judgment call that's taken, that gets supported in various ways. In the end, how that call is taken and whether it is right or wrong, it's...
We don't
Can't
want to
be sure,
eliminate humans.
yeah.
We are not against them.
So do we have a second question?
Yes. Hello?
yeah, we can hear you.
You can. Sorry. I'm from manufacturing background. I think we spoke most on the FMCG and the retail side. So my question to you is the importance of understanding the whole ecosystem before you're trying to solve one problem. Because the example we have is that in our industry, labor turnover is a huge issue, right? So everybody was trying to say, if we can predict this, it's good. So we got external consultant and they gave a predictive model, who's leaving. So then the question was, what do you do when you know who's leaving? There was no answer. For 2 years we are struggling to figure out what we do when you know somebody's leaving, right? So the question to you is, when you take on an analytics problem, how do you keep this very simple data science definition out? Because now it's like data science is predictive model. So what we actually learned is data science can be a pie chart as well, right? So how do you bring this notion out and say that when you look at a problem, it's a simpler thing, but you need to understand the whole ecosystem to solve that problem?
See, I'll use the example from my work environment, which is anything that we build in analytics, as I said, is for our consumers, but obviously, with inputs from the business team. And so when we build anything, a recommendation system, a forecasting model, a shopping assistant, or a chatbot, or whatever that may be, we keep it simple by, talking to the business teams, not bringing in any of the data science elements, and making sure that it doesn't appear to them to be a black box. Because if the minute becomes a black box, then we are probably solving it in a silo. So the kind of conversations that I have today with my business teams, for example, the category team whose inputs we use, is they actually ask us to walk us through the algorithm so that they can contribute to it and help improve it. Because we want to make sure that what we build is eventually effective, right? And so, similar to the question that came up before, people are adapting to understand, people that are not in technology are also adapting to understand how to, consume technology and leverage technology to be impactful in their own roles. And so, the inventory teams, the category teams that we talk to are never ever going to leave us, if we keep it at a very, high level jargon-based explanation of what we're doing. They actually want us to drill down, explain to them the specifics and contribute to it, and through that build a better algorithm that's more impactful. And so that's critical, that you eventually get to the level of the stakeholder and help, talk about what you're doing in their terms, and through that demystify the solution that you're building.
I think I would add that the onus also lies a bit on the business practitioner as well, right? I mean, if you look at a weather forecast today, that's also analytics, right? They are analyzing the old patterns to tell you what is the expected weather today, tomorrow, along with some recent data. You do something with it, right? You decide to take an umbrella, or you decide to work from home because you think that the traffic will be very bad if it rains. So as a practitioner, even I need to ask questions that once the predictive model is built, well, how is it going to help me? Yes, there is onus on the analytics teams as well, but unless the practitioner forces that question out. A lot of times even analysts would be happy, and a typical analyst is very happy getting a predictive model with R-square of 85%. They're like, yay, I got it. They don't want to think beyond that, because that's where, their happiness is, that I have built a perfect model. But that's where the analytics leaders and business practitioners have to come together and say, great, this model is great, but now let's start using it and figure out how it helps my business.
It's actually goes back to the culture thing, which Nidhi, you also mentioned, because you mentioned you are from HR, right? Is that?
Manufacturing.
Yeah, HR
Manufacturing. Okay. So typically, if you look at any kind of problems, I mentioned it's not about deployment only. So we can build model, we can build productive prescriptive models or forecasting models. Ultimately, you have to operationalize it. What do you mean by operationalization is nothing but a team need to be there who are bought into action on those predictions that we are making, right? So that is again driven by the organization culture. It is not just the analytics team. Everybody has to have a skin in the game. Otherwise, it cannot really bring in impact.
Do we have the next question?
Hi. Mine is not so much a question, but more a comment, but I'm not sure if the panel members might agree. I've been yesterday and today watching the definition or the implication of the term insights. And to me, we are probably giving the meaning that insights is the end game. From my analytics experience, I found that insights is work in progress. Insights are not answers. Insights usually lead to more questions. You may actually redevelop your model or change your visualizations or drill down and so on. So insights is actually an interim milestone in your analytics journey. Hence, the use of the term actionable insights, which probably is getting closer to the end game, but that's still not, so we should not imply that all insights have to be actionable. We are misleading the whole industry and probably all the budding data analysts, because insights only actually ask you to fine-tune your question rather than take the answer. I thought I'd just...
Absolutely. I think I would agree with you, but I'll just use a different phrase to probably explain it. The way I would look at it is whether you are working in a static environment versus a dynamic environment. The whole analytics game, the whole impact that everything is very, very dynamic. It is not talking about a static game at all. So I think all of us are in that same page probably.
I think you make a very good point. Insights is not the end of the story. Insights, refine further, becoming actionable insights, delivering, and by execution delivering results is the cycle that you should focus on, and quite aptly put here.
I think so long as we are able to enhance the understanding, that is what an insight is, that it allows me to understand more about the business or what happened, and then, drive the decisions after that.
And also because we are today in this topic, so the insights we are talking about here is from the data. There are also non-data and qualitative aspects which go into the eventual decision. That is why the actionable insight is close to the end, but not yet the end. Any more questions? Okay, great. So thanks to the panelists for the wonderful discussion. So just wanted to reinforce sort of the topic and reinforce sort of the insights that came out of this discussion, which is essentially this problem exists, and clients and customers will not accept a non-actionable outcome. So I think we have to work towards changing the mindset, the culture, and even sensitizing the customers and changing some of the processes in terms of how we approach analytics to be able to bridge this gap, either through technology or humans, either way, but to bridge this gap. So I think with that, we'll stop this here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.